Hey everyone, welcome to our presentation on busting silos. We're going to share a little bit about how Snowflake unites sales and marketing to win its best customers. And yes, we wrote a book about this, more on that at the end of the presentation. First, who are we? My name is Travis Henry. I'm the Director of SDR Operations and Enablement at Snowflake. I will hand it over to my counterpart, Hillary, to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Hillary Carpio. I lead the account-based marketing and customer growth marketing functions at Snowflake and am the counterpart to Travis on the SDR side. So excited to share more about our motion. So what does ABM look like at Snowflake? ABM are three letters. It can be super controversial, what they mean, how important they are, how much impact they can make. At the end of the day, for us, it's just really good marketing and getting everybody going on the same direction to the same people at the same time. So what you see here is the end-to-end process at Snowflake from collaboration to optimization. The problem though with ABM, and we hear this all the time from folks of I tried ABM and it didn't work, is that they actually start here on activation. When you start with activation, you're missing the why. What are you trying to accomplish? How are you going to measure it? You don't know if it's successful because you don't know what you're trying to do. So in order to activate, you need collaboration. And collaboration is something we hold really highly at Snowflake. We put a lot of effort into. But in order to collaborate, you need data. And that's where the intelligence comes in. And once you have these, you can then move to engagement and optimization for execution. So we're going to talk more today about how to get to this engagement and optimization side, how to not just start with activation while still having a bias toward action. So we'll go ahead and dive right in.
And so that leads us to something that Hillary and I call one team go-to-market or one team GTM. What Hillary just described was really the essence of ABM or account-based marketing. And there's a few different terms we want to clarify here. So first, account-based, account-based everything, ABX, account-based, what we consider account-based is the strategy. So it's an overall go-to-market approach where you have specific content going after specific accounts. Nothing revolutionary here. Moving on to account-based marketing. This is the team and set of tactics and campaigns that are deployed by your marketing team specifically in an account-based fashion. And what Hillary and I have found is neither of these strategies are complete. It's what gets talked about the most. It's what most of the industry buzzes about, but it's not complete. So that enters one team GTM. And what we consider one team GTM is a unified, scaled strategy and execution of an account-based motion across your go-to-market teams. In other words, this is a cross-functional team sport, and we're unifying as one, and we're busting silos across our function. So we'll talk a little bit about how you get there. There's a few distinct phases to achieving one team go-to-market. So phase one, why make a change at all? Why even consider putting in the effort to adopt a one team go-to-market motion? We'll talk about how you find your specific why. Phase number two, you got to do something. So we think of the world in terms of plays. You got to launch your first play and start to experiment and see what your results look like. Once you have results, once you're measuring, then you can scale what is working amongst those first plays. Finally, phase four, you can add complexity. So you're scaling those initial plays, but now maybe we're bringing in new cross-functional teams, other business partners to help execute on one team go-to-market. The final piece, and where we hope you land, is that one team GTM. So I'll start really quickly with find your why. Why are you doing this and how will you measure it? So there's a few different reasons, and all of them are valid. Maybe you're looking to close bigger deals. Maybe you want to just prioritize your efforts more effectively. Maybe you have a sophisticated buying group that you're trying to get in front of. Maybe it's 7, 8, 9 people involved in a decision for your solution. Pick a lane, have conversations, and decide what is the thing you're trying to accomplish as a business. This is not going to be the same for everybody. And it's super, super important that you do this because it's going to give you a key performance indicator or a KPI. What is our outcome and how do we measure goal to outcome? Way too often, we're like the meme on the right here, where you're sitting there for ages. You're looking for a problem for the ABM solution that maybe you just poured a ton of money into. Don't put the cart before the horse. Define your why, get a measurable outcome, and then you can build in the plays that we're going to talk about here shortly. Now, the first step in doing this and moving forward and finding your why is finding your partner in crime. Hillary and I are at a massive company at Snowflake. We have about 8,000 employees, $2 billion run rate. We're a global business. We are not saying you need to be at that scale to get started. Instead, you just need to find a single person who believes in the same mission that you do. Someone to work with, very simple. That might be you in the sales team, someone over in marketing. That could be you on the SDR side, and you find a demand gen marketer to help get going. That could be you're running a team of account executives in the field, and you have a field marketer that you can start to run some plays with. Or it could be Travis and Hillary. I like that Hillary opted to go for the mullet look and I get the tie, but you got to find someone who believes in the same mission that you do. So that's all a little abstract, a little fuzzy. Let's get specific. Hillary's going to talk about launching your first play.
Yeah, the hardest part of one team go to market, in my opinion, is getting something off the ground in a meaningful way. So we're going to walk you through step by step how we're looking at this. We have what we call a 1-2 punch, and this is a way we simplify an otherwise fairly complex process of getting everyone aligned. So at the beginning of often the quarter or the end of the previous quarter, the account-based marketing team will suggest a list of topic and accounts to the AEs. Now, this can go two ways. It can either be the AE saying, hey, here's the topics I really want to focus on, and we come back with the accounts, or we can say, hey, here's what intent is showing us, and here's the accounts that are related. We then work with the AEs, SDRs, and the ABMers to choose the topic and the account. So we've now identified an account list. And I want to point out this is very different than what a lot of people do in the sense that it is one narrative to a multiple large list or semi-large list of accounts, as opposed to a narrative that somebody wants to pursue, but the accounts don't care about that. So we're kind of matching up the interests of the accounts with what we're offering from the sales perspective. Next, we launched the ABM campaign. So this ABM campaign is going to include advertising. It can include direct mail. It has a microsite built just for the account or set of accounts. And the magic here is really twofold. It's picking the right accounts to begin with, so they have the right time. And then it's also getting the right content that matches that message and topic that you chose. We let this marinate for 2 weeks and then have the SDRs reach out with an outbound sequence. We've had a previous SDR in the Snowflake organization fondly call this warm calling, which I love. That 2 weeks gives an opportunity to switch from cold calling, they've never heard about what we're trying to sell, to warm calling. And then at the end of the quarter, we retarget non-engagers with what we call our flurry. And what this means is that instead of at the end of the quarter trying to get additional engagement from additional accounts, we go back to that original list of accounts, look who exactly at the people level were targeted by the SDRs, and then target them with a gated call to action and try to get an SLA in through the end of the quarter. Most important factor here is clear expectations. So we've simplified it on the slide. It can be simple in real life, but there's assumptions that are made on a daily basis by anybody. So we're talking about clarify with calendar invites of when each person is supposed to launch their piece, clarify with a green and red column on the Excel spreadsheet of whether it's opted in by each of the parties. There's a lot of ways to just clarify exactly who's supposed to do what so that you don't have any missed handoffs. And then in order to be successful in the play, you have to plan it with data. So throughout the book that Travis and I wrote, and kind of the way we approach our job is to think about what is minimum viable to get a program like this off the ground, and then what does scale look like? So from a minimum viable perspective, you want to look at things like intent data. And this is really about timing. So you know what accounts you're interested in from your ICP and the exercises you've gone through, but what accounts are showing interest in the things that you sell? That's where intent comes in. You can also use first-party web visitor data if they've made it to your website, firmographic, of course, or anything else you have. And this is probably the most important. You don't necessarily need to go procure an entire new set of data. Use what you have and use it to work smarter within your programs that you're running. You can export that into a spreadsheet, create your own DIY score, or at scale, you could use an ABM platform, have a marketing qualified account score using ML and AI like we do at Snowflake. Or you can aggregate all the data like we did using Snowflake on the left. You can see an example with anonymized data of what our Snowflake sales reps, SDRs, ABMers, etc. get to see in one view of all of their accounts. So takeaway of this is timing plus fit equals impact. You need both. Fit alone won't work. Timing alone won't work. Cool. So how do we understand fit versus engagement a little bit better? You have to know your ICP first, like we were just talking about, and then you want to do an analysis of prior customers. So do they look like customers who bought from you before? The next piece is, do they want you? Again, we're going to break this down into a few pieces. I find that people get confused on the engagement side. So I like to just break it down into first party and third party. First party, they're engaging with your campaigns on your property, your website, your events, whatever other venues you might have. And then third parties are engaging with topics related to your solution outside of your own properties. That can be on publisher sites, that can be at trade shows that are more corporate, owned by other companies. This can be anything that is not on your website that indicates there's interest. These can also be additional signals. Are they posting job postings related to what you sell? Are one of your champions moving to another account? There's a lot of other signals outside of just web visitors that can help you figure this out. You can see on the left as an example of how we do it at Snowflake. That box on the left is a stack ranking of accounts with an engagement score. That's something our marketing intelligence team has created to help us with that engagement. The red and green, just for reference, red indicates that the account has not been touched by an SDR in the last 14 days. Green means it has. When we go back to that expectation settings, that's a really clear expectation. If it's red, it needs to be green.
Awesome. And we're moving on to building a narrative. So Hillary covered some must-do parts of planning your first play. If you're going after the wrong accounts and you don't have alignment across your functions on which accounts you want to go after and are worth pursuing, the rest of this doesn't really matter. But once you have that prioritization set, the next thing you want to do is build a narrative around those accounts. Super important. What are you going to say to these businesses, to these organizations that's going to resonate? And how are you going to string that narrative across the different touch points and functions from your business? So some examples of taking the data points and stringing together a narrative. Maybe you understand that they have a particular tech stack in place currently, and you have a competitive differentiation. So you're going to go with a migration messaging play. Maybe there's a competitor installed, and now we want to do a competitive takeout. Maybe those intent topics that are surfacing are telling you, hey, this is a huge company of tens of thousands of people, but we have an understanding that the finance or the IT department is really engaged around our solution. Let's go after that line of business or LOB. And then finally, maybe there's some campaign engagement around our first party data in a particular topic that they've been engaging with us with. Really important, you can go out, source publicly available data. This is where your SDR team becomes key. They have tools and they have the know-how to go out and put together that narrative. Finally, we talk about people activation. So I like to say that, I think I've got it on the bottom of the slide here. You can't log into your email client and shoot off an email to a business. Maybe you can, info at or support at, but ultimately our business is selling to people. So you need to guide your teams around which individuals inside of those accounts are most important to activate. And so some tips for activation. Again, intent topics are a little bit of a tea leaf to tell you which departments or personas might be most engaged with your company or ready for a conversation. Number two is super, super important, especially for those of you building dashboards or working with teams that build dashboards. We coined a new term throughout this process at Snowflake. We call them action boards, not dashboards. And the challenge behind building an action board is if you look at any given component or chart on your action board, does it tell you exactly which action to take? Is that clear and evident? For example, here on the left, you can see what our action board looks like for Snowflake. The very first piece of this in the very top left is how many marketable people do we have at this company in our database? Because we know unless we have a list of contacts, we can't take any additional steps. So if this number is below our benchmark, in other words, we don't have enough marketable people to go after this account successfully, then I know my action is to enrich the database and go find contacts. That's my first step. Super, super important to make it easy to activate. Of course, prioritize your engaged contacts first. So highly recommend some sort of weighting or scoring model across your contacts database. Like Hillary mentioned, who haven't we touched recently? Maybe it's the last 14 days, maybe it's the last 60 days. Who hasn't been touched and needs to be engaged? And then again, append data as needed. So ABM can help with that. The marketing organization can help warm up those accounts, build out the database. And of course, your SDR and sales teams should have a data provider as well. All right, that's your first plays. Now, how do you scale that up? I'll hand it back to Hillary.
Yeah, so when we think about scale, a lot of people think we need to scale right from the start and we need to scale this specific campaign. And the reality is you need to know what's working before you start scaling. So on the screen here, we've listed out some of what we call inspection metrics. And these are, instead of the NKPI, like say your ACV, you have what leads to that. How many accounts are surging? How many engaged people are there? What is the phone connect rate? How many meetings per account? These all help you get to that outcome and can help you measure along the way to see where you can tweak and where you can optimize. On the left, you can see the percentages. We look at this like a waterfall. So we can see, did we get meaningful lift in the percentages in, say, a one-team go-to-market approach versus a non-one-team go-to-market approach? When an SDR, when an AE, when an ABMer is going after an account without everybody going in at the same time with the same message, the same people, what are the results? And we compare these side by side. But it all comes back to the same structure we started with. You have your collaboration, intelligence, activation, engagement, and optimization. The beautiful thing is you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Once you have the operational component of this figured out, who works with who, how you do it, you really can keep replicating end to end that same structure. And instead, you just sub out which campaigns, which messaging, which audiences, which content go into this infrastructure. So that's one of my biggest pieces of advice is don't reinvent the wheel every time you need to go to market. Figure out what works for you. And hey, yours might look a little bit different than this. Totally fine. Find what works for you and continue to replicate it and optimize the things that need to go better. And don't be afraid to ditch the things that don't work. If it works for someone else and doesn't work for you, fine, get rid of it. And once you do that, then you can add complexity. So on the screen here, you're going to see an example of the basic tiers that we have in our one-team go-to-market approach at Snowflake. At the top level, we have what we call our one-to-one strategic. These are nominated by the RVP, and they're what I like to call the Roomba vacuum accounts, meaning that it doesn't matter if a Roomba runs into a closed door, it's going to shift and turn and go down a hallway until it finds an open one. If it goes in the open door and cleans the whole room, doesn't find anything, it's going to come back out and find the next door and go into the next room. That's what these accounts are. They're there for the entire year. We work on them with field marketings, SDRs, AEs, and partner marketing to ensure we have a cross-functional win. Digital one-to-one is our bread and butter tier. These are nominated by the AE. They're done quarterly, and each AE gets 3 to 5 accounts. We work with field marketing, SDRs, and AEs here, and these are a little more fluid, changing every couple of months. One to few is really our product marketing competitive tier. So we're looking at anywhere between 15 to 50 accounts per DM, often focused on technographics. So what install base do they have? What features could they adopt, etc. And then going into one to many, these are often nominated at the DM level and focused on intent, much higher volumes of 30 to 60 per DM by quarterly. And we're focused on quick wins. Last is people retargeting. This is this flurry that I referred to in our 1-2 punch portion of the presentation. And this is really retargeting already nominated. You consider this like zero waste marketing or really making the most out of what you've already put into a campaign. This has become a standard part of our operations because it's so successful. So we include it as part of what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, Hillary. And wrapping things up here, I mentioned we would get back to the book at the end of our presentation. So your playbook for one team go-to-market, if you got interested in some of the topics that we covered today, Hillary and I wrote a book about it. It's about 250 pages of detailed, very tactical goodness in our book, Busting Silos. So you can pop your phone out, open your camera app, point it at this QR code, and that's going to take you to a site where you can purchase the book. So again, thank you so much for your attention today and for talking about this with us for about 20 minutes. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.